Okay, so I've seen a number of posts on Facebook where people are saying the car won't start. Now I don't know if that's a no-run condition where it won't run or it won't start at all. So what I'm going to do is go through a couple of things to look for whenever you have a problem with a car that either won't run or it won't start. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check battery voltage on my battery. I'll take my voltmeter and put it over to volts DC. Wait for it to crunk up. 12.42, that's enough voltage to start anything. I'm going to be going over here in a minute the difference between Petronics and points and starting up. Some other Hall effect style distributors are that way as well, but that's going to be in just a second after the break.
For 45 years, the Miller family and the dedicated staff at Autocrafters have been here helping you to restore your dream Ford. Thank you for your support. Here's to another 45 years of delivering parts for your Falcon, Fairlane, F100, Galaxy, Maverick, and Pinto.
So if you're working with an automatic, you want to make sure it's in park. If you're working with a manual shift, put it in neutral. Also, throw in a set of wheel chocks just to be safe. All right, now, the next thing I'm going to talk about is setting this thing up to do some tests on it and make sure everything's working properly. I like having one of these. You can do what I'm about to do with a screwdriver, but it's much easier with one of these start buttons. Kind of hard to see probably on my shirt. I'm going to show you how to hook it up. All right, so you put one of these on the positive side of the battery and the other one on the start solenoid. On the starter side of the solenoid. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to test to see if we've got a good rotation on the engine, that the starter's operating like it's supposed to. This one's starting to slow down a little bit, but that's because the battery's a little weak on this car. It's not a very fresh battery. Again, when we started off, we had 12.4 volts, so we were in good shape. Now I would probably want to go in and put a trickle charger on it just to let it warm back up, so to speak. So the next thing you want to know is, okay, I've got rotation. I've probably got air because the pistons are going up and down. So the next thing I'm going to be checking for, do I have fuel going from the carburetor down into the engine for spark? I'm going to check the carb first because it's actually the easiest thing to talk about. All right, you're going to have to look at the back of me for a second here, but I want to show you what I'm talking about. You're going to take and grab a flashlight, and your accelerator is usually on the side, this side of the carburetor. On an American car, or most cars, you'll find the accelerator linkage and you'll push down on it. And you can see that we're getting fuel immediately going down and squirting out of the venturis. What that tells me is we have fuel, that the carburetor is operating correctly. If you're not getting any fuel coming out of those squirters on 90% of the carburetors that you have on classic American cars, that means you probably have a fuel delivery problem. Either you have a problem in the float bowls where the float is either stuck down or stuck up. Usually it's stuck down in those cases, so you're not getting enough fuel in there. Even with the float all the way at the bottom, though, you will get accelerator pump. It may not stay running, but you'll get accelerator pump. So that usually means that there's no gas in the carburetor. Just like the guy said in the movie, I know what's wrong with it. Ain't got no gas in it. So now we're moving on to something else. All right, now for the next part of this, you want to put the car in run, not start, but run. And so it's sitting there ready to rock and roll. You want to take your remote starter that you've hooked up and pull your plug wire off of here and set it on the center point of the distributor, and then roll the car over. Now you can see spark in there. It's a little weak, I think. It should be basically a blue spark. Now I'm going to go turn the ignition off because on a Petronics, which this car has in it, if you leave the ignition switch on and it's on the read position of the wheel, it can actually damage the unit inside. So if you leave the ignition switch on a Petronics, you can damage them. All right, so what have we learned now at this point? What we've learned is we do have spark going to the distributor. So now if we still don't have a start condition with the car, it could mean that we have a problem down inside the cap. I'm going to go over two different versions of this. I'm going to go over the version with points, I'm going to go over the version with Petronics to know whether the electrical side of this thing is up to snuff. All right, so now we've talked about what happens. We've got fire coming to the distributor through the coil wire. We've seen it spark down into the distributor, so we know we have ignition at least to that point. But what if there's a problem down inside the cap that's causing it not to run? Now we're going to talk about point systems first. So there's two things that can cause you a problem underneath the cap on a point system. One of them is your condenser. Now if the condenser is not operating or operating correctly, it won't fire. You won't get that buildup of charge that you need from the condenser to fire the points. You can test a condenser lightly. This is not the best way to test it, but it is a way to test it. You put your meter on ohms. Thanks for letting me know you're still there. And then also, I've got this one set up on auto, which means it'll read whatever I've got going on. You're going to want to ground the case and then touch the hot lead to this to charge the condenser. You'll see that it real quickly, it's building a charge. We have a charge and now we're at 0, which that's what you want to see. That's good. So we know that it will take a charge. Will it discharge? You simply flip it around. You put the red lead on the case and the black lead on here, and it'll show you discharging it. Now it doesn't have any charge in it anymore. Now there is something fun you can do with this. You can actually take this and charge it up with a 9-volt battery and throw it at your friend. When he catches it, he'll be the ground. I don't recommend you doing that with your friends because you won't have friends for very long a lot of times. But back in the day, boy howdy, when we were teenagers, taking one of those and throwing them at a buddy of yours, that was a lot of fun. Now I'm going to talk about the point side of this. I'm going to drag this out of the way and bring my points in here that I've got. What you're going to want to do is to make sure that your points are opening and closing correctly. That is the biggest thing in this. If the points aren't opening and closing correctly, or if they're really dirty, you may not be getting enough spark to start the engine. But I will say this, points will operate in almost any condition. Most of the time on these classic cars, they're actually working on 6 volts. So if a car is going to start, typically that's what will make it start. You'll have a situation where with a set of points it's going to operate. But if the points are set too wide or they're set too close, you're not going to get the kind of spark out of it that you need. So you're going to want to grab yourself a set of gauges like this so you can check the points gap on it. And on a Ford, it's a lot of fun. GMs are a lot easier, unfortunately, for that. But the Ford, you have to take the cap off, rotate it. You can get something that's a dwell meter to check the dwell on it to make sure you're getting enough time on the points for operation. But if the points are set correctly and you've got fuel, the only other thing to then check is put everything back together with your points, with a good condenser in there, and then just pull the spark plug lead off of number 1 and see if you're getting 12 volts or 6 volts on a system that is not Petronics, and check that. Now you can buy one of these lead sets that I've got in front of me here that you can see. That's a way to check to see if you're getting spark at number 1. All right, I'm going to move off of the point system now. We're going to talk about Petronics because so many people have them in the cars these days. That is a real issue, and you want to know how to test that to make sure you've got good functionality from your Petronics when you're running the car. The very first thing I will say about that is these systems, the Petronic style systems, really don't like any less than 11 volts. I've had a lot of problems with them not wanting to start if your voltage is below 11. So you want to have a good solid 12 volts or more. You know, your battery should be up at 12.8, whatever that number needs to be in order for you to get it to start. Anything below 11 is probably not going to start for you or not start and run well. So you're going to need to make sure you've got good solid 12 volts on a Petronics system. All right, so we're going to test out the Petronics now, show you how to do that in case you're working with one. You want to make sure everything's copacetic. You're going to want to go in and put a negative on the negative post of your battery. From there to the negative point on your multimeter needs to be on volts DC. You'll want to run a lead from the coil slash wire that goes into the Petronics, the red one, on the positive side. and then you want to run that to your positive lead on your voltmeter. Now we're reading a little bit of voltage across here. I'm not sure why that is, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go in and turn the ignition key in the car on. Ignition is on. Already reading 0.5 volts. See, our battery is nearly dead, but you did see that we do have 11.95 volts coming to the Petronics igniter. Once again, I'm going to say this: do not let that Petronics igniter sit like that on that hot spot, because if you do, it'll burn out the igniter. Turn the ignition key off. And I'm going to unhook all this Petronics stuff now, but like I said, just do not leave that thing running. Now you'll see we have 0 volts running through it. We're good to go on that front, so that could be a problem within the ignition switch that's causing it to do that. The slow start, definitely a battery problem. We probably need to put this thing on a trickle charge for a couple of days before we can start it and run it for real. It did start and run earlier this morning, but I think it still needs to be charged up a little bit more. So I'm going to pull all this out of here and set everything back to normal. Put the cap back on. And talked about a couple more things. So, what else? Well, the what else really boils down to, if it's not in any of those areas, believe me, if you have spark at the distributor, your ignition system is operating correctly. It depends on the color of the spark. If the spark is a nice bright blue or a white, you're okay. If your spark is very yellow, then you have an ignition problem somewhere in the system. It may be wiring that's corroded and no longer any good. It could be a lot of things within that. You're going to need to start back tracing to the ignition switch. Our ignition switch on this car, I think, is doing a little bit of backfeeding. I don't think the ignition switch is actually shutting off completely when we turn the ignition off. Witness the fact that we had a mild, small amount of voltage running through the system even after we turned the ignition switch off at one point, making me wonder if we don't have a small voltage draw off the system from that. Rust is a problem on anything in the classic car that sits around. If it sees any kind of amount of humidified weather, like rain, or it sits around in a really wet climate like we have here where we have high humidity, or down in Florida where they have a lot of humidity, check your connections, all of your connections, to make sure that you've got good solid voltage running through them, that they're ohming out okay, and you need to find out what ohms you need to be running by the wire size and all that. So that's something you'll have to go out and look up on your own to make sure everything's copacetic there. If you guys want to see us do a video on the aftermath of this when you do finally get the car running, because sometimes you can get it running, but it's running like trash and you don't know why. This one is actually running a little bit like trash. We do have an exhaust leak that's developed, and we also have a skip in the engine now that we didn't have before. And I think I know what the problem of that is, and that would be fuel. I know we've done fuel ad nauseum over on Autorestomod, but what I'm going to talk about with this one is not necessarily the fuel, but the aftermath of what can happen with problematic gas. And that's any old gas, that's not just ethanol. And I think what's happened is the plugs on this one have gotten fouled by the fuel system, I think. I'm hoping that's what it is. I'm hoping it's nothing more than that. But that's really it, folks. I hope this helps you out if you're trying to find out how to make your car run when it just stopped running for no reason. All the little things that you can check to make sure everything's going copacetic on the car. And with that, do me a favor and be kind to each other, love on each other, treat each other nice. You guys have a great week, and we'll see you on down the road. It's almost ready for me to bumper it up and just drive the piss out of it with the 3-speed and the 260. Not gonna lie. I'm at a point where I'd like to be able to do that. But it'll get done. We're gonna make it happen. Absolutely.